So today's offering from the self-doubt and personal power resource cupboard comes from the tub of learning about your unique style. So, why would you want to learn about your unique style as a therapist, as a coach, as a facilitator, a teacher? Like, why would you even bother? Basically, because it makes you a more effective therapist or facilitator, teacher or coach. So, myself and my colleague Sylvia Camistral have got a workshop coming up that's really based on and riffs off the fabulous work of Dr. Amy Mindell, who wrote this book, Your Unique Facilitator Style. Explore your special gifts and powers as a facilitator, a therapist, teacher, coach, and a helper. And in this book, Amy lists lots of different ways or portals into discovering our style through things that disturb us, or often even starting to recognize the things that we don't even realize or notice about how we particularly do things, because they're a bit like that story of the fish who asks, "What's this thing called water that I hear about?" So it's kind of like these things that are around us and through us, but that we barely even notice because we're just so used to them. And so we're going to use this book as the inspiration for this experiential series. And we're going to focus on things like how to find your style, exploring different elements of your style, and also how you can create more supportive conditions to bring your style into your work. But anyway, about this lobster headband. So, one of the things that I know about my style is that some of the things that actually get the most traction or energy with others have been the very same things that I have tried to tone down to be a proper therapist or facilitator. Things like following random sparks of ideas and weird, absurd threads. And so today, as a case in point, I thought, I got to record that video. And then right at the same time, just a random thought went, wear a weird hat and look like a lobster. So in the past, I would have ignored that part out of fear and kind of like, you can't do that. A therapist doesn't wear a lobster hat. But now I know better, and not just about wearing lobster hats, but I guess what I actually know through my learnings is that this random idea is actually less random than I think. And in my case, more related to proving a point about how constrained we are by norms and shoulds when we think about things like therapy and facilitation. And the stifling impact of those things can also be the stifling of many of your different, unique knowledges and insights. So, those weird, quirky, random thoughts that I have are actually part of my way of knowing and being. And they're how I get insights, and how I get insight into things is actually directly relevant to my work. And no, I'm not making an argument for just put on a lobster hat and anyone can be a therapist. It's not to say that you can't have skills and you need skills. And of course, you absolutely need to learn skills first before you can start to play with them. But it's more an argument for how you can harness one aspect of your personal power for your work. So I invite you to start paying a little bit of attention. If you can notice things that come to you naturally, and you might have been given, so this is about the water, like in that fish analogy. Start to pay attention to the things that just are so easy for you, or it might be things that other people comment on about you that you don't really recognize, but pay attention to those things. And then, or it might be the things even that you can't help doing. Like, no matter how hard you try and change them, you still do it anyway. And my invitation to you is that instead of trying to minimize those things, particularly if they're things you can't help doing, try doing them a bit more and see what happens. Here's another take on this idea. It doesn't just come from that one perspective. So, one of my favorite authors and facilitators is Priya Parker, who wrote this book, probably know it, The Art of Gathering, about how we gather people in meaningful and impactful ways. And I was listening to a podcast recently where she was discussing people hosting a party and how there's this occurrence that happens where, in an effort to not impose on guests, people can make parties kind of just like really broad, and it sort of loses a bit of meaning because of that kind of just broad blanket openness, because they don't really give guests any guardrails to kind of work with. And that ironically, when you really work with your specifics, why this party is important, what's the root of it, the quirky specifics in relation to you, it actually frees you up to really make it about them. And she asks the question about how do you hold this balance between both giving people something that's a bit more than the just same old generic thing, but also still make sure it serves them. And that's the art, right? When we're talking about your style as a therapist or as a facilitator, how do you get this balance where you don't just, bland yourself out? You bring something that's uniquely you, but ultimately that it still serves your clients. And we know the same principle applies in leadership and good facilitation. That if, for example, you have structural power or authority, that actually, if you step away from that power or that authority, it actually doesn't serve the group. So the same principle applies. And ultimately, our style is an aspect of our personal power. It's something we can use, it's something we can harness. And when we can really embrace it and bring it to the fore, not only are we more aware, we're more kind of in flow because we're sort of more at ease. So it's also more sustainable. But precisely because of those things, it frees us up to focus more fully on the client or the group. Amazing, right? So, if you've done some process work training or you're a process work therapist or facilitator and you'd like to do some professional development on your style, join Sylvia Camastral and I for this 4-part online training. It's on Saturdays, 9 till 12 Australian Eastern Standard Time, and it's happening on Saturday, the 19th of September, 3rd of October, the 14th, and the 28th of November. You can book your place via Australia New Zealand Process Oriented Psychology. I'll put the link somewhere around here. And thanks.